A Harvard grad. We do have some breaking news that we need to ask. Did ISIS do it? At this hour, both U.S. and British authorities starting to lift their hands, preparing to point the finger at terrorists as the cause of that Russian jet crash Saturday over the Sinai Desert. U.S. intelligence now saying that internet chatter suggests the Islamic State planted a bomb on the plane. If it did, the war on ISIS may have just gotten a lot bigger. Walid Phares is the author of Future Jihad, Terrorist Strategies Against the West. He's a Fox News Middle East and terrorism expert. Walid, no formal conclusion just yet. We need to stress that. But what's your take? Do you think this looks and smells like terrorism?
Egyptians and Russians are in full control of the investigation on the ground. So the final report will be in their hands, and they are weighing in the political ramifications. I heard some on the Arab news saying that the Egyptians are still very reticent to declare that for many economic reasons. But Britain and the United States, mostly I think the United States, were able to determine because of satellite imagery or other ways that there was an explosion. And third, as you just announced, there's this chatter online which I'm focusing on to see what ISIS is talking about. So it all indicates that the possibility of ISIS is very high, but really the ones going to declare it are going to be the Egyptians and the Russians.
Okay, so some of the other things that you referenced, so let's just articulate that. There was a sudden flash that could be seen by satellite photos. The flight data recording ends abruptly, so you don't hear any screaming or anything horrific like that. But how do you expect Russia to act? It almost seems like if it is indeed ISIS, ISIS has poked the bear in the eye, in the heart, in the knees. What do you think happens, and what does Putin do?
Well, if indeed this is ISIS behind it or affiliate to ISIS in the Sinai, which most likely could be the case, the Russians already know it. So the Russians are now preparing their strategy. What is it that they're going to say in general? What is it they're going to do on the ground? So I imagine that Russian intelligence services, the army are now meeting with President Putin to see what would be the next step. Because the next step is not going to be simple and easy. And one of the theories is that the Russians are going to actually increase their forces in Syria on the ground. Not just Air Force, but also forces on the ground, saying that we are fighting a full-fledged war on terror, plus the possibility that they would conduct strikes probably way beyond the areas that they have shelled so far.
Isn't it amazing that Egypt had the peace deal with Israel back with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, and the Israelis gave back the Sinai Desert, and clearly the Egyptians have allowed, intentionally or not, these affiliates of ISIS to flare up and set up shop in the Sinai Desert. I mean, would this have happened? I know it's counterfactual, but if the Israelis were still in charge of the Sinai, how could Egypt have let this happen?
Well, not the Israelis and not much under Mubarak. It really happened during that year where Morsi, the president of Egypt, who was elected, who was Muslim Brotherhood, he gave them a lot of support. First, he actually invited many of these Islamist jihadists to rallies in Cairo. They had a free ride until he was removed. So now we are dealing with the results of what he has done.
Great point. Walid, thank you very much. And once again, we are watching a very tenuous situation. No definitive mention of whether it's terrorism, but the UK and the US affiliates and investigators are believing that it looks like that. Walid Phares.